you going, guys? Tony Angus, the conflict guy here. Another tip for managing conflict, managing aggression, generally being safe, learning how to communicate effectively, etc. So, making sure I'm safe when I cross the road. I had a conversation with a young lady recently, and she explained how scared she is of confrontation. You know, so she said, "Oh, I just avoid conflict." She said, "I'm just too scared to do anything about it." Now, this is a common thing, where instead of dealing with any conflict, people in fact avoid it. Now, there's a problem there, and the problem is deep and complex. But it boils down to this: unless you can learn to effectively confront conflict, you're not going to create any change. And so you're effectively becoming submissive to that. So anybody who wants to say anything, do anything around you, they're going to get away with it. Now, as much as I like to communicate effectively and talk about good strategies for managing conflict, the last thing that I agree with is just letting people get away with stuff. So we need to have mechanisms by which we can deal with conflict, deal with disagreements, deal with confrontation, but also, you know, we can deal with aggravations as well. We need to be able to learn to speak our mind. So my first message for you is this: conflict is a temporary discomfort. So yeah, it doesn't feel good at the time, but it doesn't last. And so if you can put yourself out, then, you know, eventually we're aiming for that change that you're after. The second thing is, it's about how well do you do it? How do you create change, but at the same time maintain relationships? And so that's conflict management. You know, it's important that we create some change so that the person or the situation in which we find ourselves changes and we don't have to deal with it over and over again. But we must maintain the relationships because we are a pack animal. We are a social creature. And as much as, and I've said this in the past in other vlogs, as much as you might think you want to tell the rest of the world to get lost, the simple truth is we live in societies for a reason. That's where we're safe, that's where we can flourish and thrive, and that's where we can raise families to flourish and thrive. So it's about how do we then meet that conflict in a way that is balanced, mature, adult, etc., appropriate. And so, without going into specific techniques, let's talk about categories that we can choose in order to deal with these things. And there are 4. I can choose to do nothing. In fact, there's 2 ways that you can choose to do nothing. So of the 4, 2 of them are doing nothing. One is doing nothing and truly not caring. So you do nothing because you don't mind what's going on. It's not really conflict to you. It's not really even that challenging. And so you don't bother. And that's called being passive about it. Being truly passive, it doesn't bother you. Take it or leave it. The problem is, there are very few people who are truly passive when it comes to these situations. Most people are troubled or confronted by one thing or another and find it difficult to truly be passive about it. The second way of doing nothing is to be submissive. You do nothing at the time, you grumble about it later. So you do nothing, you say nothing, And it's as this young lady was saying, the reason is that you don't want to enter into any confrontation. So I'm going to interrupt myself here. It's a magnificent day in Melbourne, so I thought I'd take a stroll. I'll stroll through one of the local parks. Fantastic place. Anyway, so being submissive is to do nothing about it at the moment, in the moment of conflict, but to grumble and grizzle about it later, to go home, to talk to your partner about it, to what's called whinge in Australia, I guess whine in the United States, to whinge about it to others, and to basically do nothing but be upset about it and to carry that upset with you. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to work out that's unhealthy. If you have a problem with a situation and you don't deal with it one way or another, that's unhealthy. That'll sit like a tar inside you and become a greater stress over time. And the last thing we need is more stress. So typically we don't recommend being submissive about conflict. And so the next category is to be aggressive about it. And I've spoken about this in previous posts where I talked about how something happens, people get into conflict, and then they launch their own counter-attack. They become aggressive and they use both barrels and they really create a bigger confrontation possibly than was necessary. And a bigger confrontation certainly than was healthy. And so when we look at the two things, change and relationships, that I discussed earlier, we want to create change, but we want to maintain relationships. So you have to ask yourself, passive, submissive, aggressive, do they create change and maintain relationships? Well, passive and submissive don't create change. So there's the two failing. Aggressive creates change, sometimes wholesale change, but it destroys relationships. And so as much as you want to tell the other person to F off and, as much as you want to get upset and really hit them with both barrels, it's just unwise and unhealthy and it ruins relationships. So that leaves us with one further option. And it's the option that I would prefer you to use. And you've all heard it, it's to be assertive. Now this is the problem for this young lady. She hasn't learned how to be assertive. She hasn't worked out what assertiveness is, the component parts of assertiveness. And so to be assertive to her is this foreign language and this foreign skill. All right, well there's plenty of things I want to talk to you about that. First of all, developing any skill is simply practice. It's the same thing as if you can't do a push-up. If you can't do a push-up today, then get down on your hands and knees and do one with your knees on the floor. And eventually you'll develop the strength to be able to do a handful of push-ups that way, and then lift your knees up and do the planking push-up. And then if you did that every single day, if you did 5 a day, within a week you'll be able to do 10. You do that every day, within another week you'll be able to do 20. It's just building the muscle. Managing conflict is the same. Developing the communication and assertion skills to be able to manage conflict is like doing push-ups. You've just got to do more and you'll get better and better at it. But people avoid it and they become crap at it because they never try it. So it's like anybody, if they've never done a push-up, they're not gonna do a push-up. If you've never managed conflict properly, chances are you're not gonna manage conflict properly. So, practice. Learn the skills of assertion. Now, what are those skills? First of all, assertive people take on board what's being said, analyze it objectively without getting all hell-bent about it. Don't take things personally. It's impossible to be objective about stuff if the first thing you do is take it personally. So don't run it through your emotional filters. Don't get all bent out of shape because somebody said something. Yeah, they might have been inappropriate and rude, but deal with it in balanced and mature and appropriate and adult fashion. So learn how to be assertive. Now, assertiveness comes with certain qualities. The first is don't turn it on them. So you don't want to say things like, well, you are, or, you know, you're no better. That's a childish way of responding. But the second is, don't be aggressive with it and say, how dare you talk to me like that? I'll give you a smack in the mouth. But don't do anything stupid like that. If you're upset, you can say, I'd prefer. So assertive language is spoken with I phrases. I need, I would like, I would prefer. I have to ask you to. So if someone raises their voice, don't tell them, you better keep your voice down, because it's aggressive. Instead, say something like, I'd prefer it if you'd lower your voice again. So, assertive language. Assertive body language would be form your stance, square up to them, be confident, keep your head held high, don't eyeball them. It's not a competition, but nod and look at them as a mature person who's thinking about what's being said and is being considered in their responses. And then use the I phrases. I would prefer, I'd like to think, I'm going to have to ask you to, etc. If you use assertive qualities, you're more likely to create change and still maintain the relationship. So you're dealing with both categories, and it's the only one of those four that does that. It's the only one of the four qualities that actually deals with change and with relationships in a positive manner and allows you to maintain both. So get used to it, practice. Now, where do you practice? Well, I recommend practicing at home. Practice among people who don't care if you get it wrong. Practice with your partner, your spouse, or whoever you've got, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. Because they're going to appreciate, A, that you're trying, and they may cut you some slack if you get it wrong. And over the journey, you'll get better at it. And then if you ever have to try it in the workplace, you'll be much better at it. And that's the idea. Righto, guys. As always, if you found this post useful, make sure you click like and hit share, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's pretty easy. Sign up for YouTube and just hit the subscribe button at the bottom of the videos. And poke your finger on my ugly mug and that should get it. Or your cursor if you're using a mouse. If you want me to talk about something, sing out. I'm happy to do that. If you want to make a comment about anything, maybe you've got something to add or something to subtract from what I've said. Either way, I'd be delighted to hear from you, and I've really appreciated the comments and the suggestions I've received so far. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for having me in your home or in your workplace. I look forward to sharing information with you again soon. This is Tony Angus telling it like it is, and I'll catch you again soon. Ciao for now.